All right. So let's get rocking and rolling. Appreciate everybody's time today. Want to make sure that we're all walking away with some value from this call. Today we're going to be talking about the about a very near and dear topic to my heart, profit. Okay. I want to talk about how we can maintain our focus on profit and how we can work our business and ensure that every job we are working on is profitable. Okay. So I'll be sharing with you guys some reminders for some. Again, it might sound redundant, but it's important that we're constantly being reminded of the fundamentals to running a contracting business. So I'll be sharing some of those, as well as some tips for guys that aren't quite there just yet, or are working their way to being there. So with that said, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Can you see my screen? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so most contractors, especially when they're first starting out, they believe that if they just work harder, profit's going to work itself out if they stay busy. All right. So the truth is, staying busy doesn't mean staying profitable, or activity equals success. All right. So out of curiosity, and I always like to ask lots of questions, so don't mind me, but how many of you guys believe this at one point or still believe that this to some degree? How many of you guys have been guilty of this? If we're busy, we must be profitable. If we got work, we must be profitable, right? And then we get to the end of the year and we do our taxes, and what happens? We find out we're not profitable, right? So a lot of this is what it's actually costing you. Where are we losing the profit in these jobs? Where are we losing our focus on what's most important and fundamental to being successful as a contractor? The first place I'm going to say, all right, is losing track of your margins, all right, because you're not job costing. That's going to be my very first place that I look with most contractors, is that when we stand back and look, yeah, we may be working, 60 hours, all right, but there's no money in the bank account, all right? We're doing huge jobs, all right? But maybe we haven't priced those properly. Maybe we've made some mistakes that have killed our margin, right? We have zero clarity on profits until our accountant or bookkeeper tells us. All right. And that, my friends, is a great way to burn yourself out. It's a great way to lose companies, and lots of guys do. And it all can be prevented, right? It's actually much easier to prevent it from happening than most guys really understand or think. Now, the problem that always comes up is most guys are not bookkeepers or accountants. If you're in the trades, it was probably to avoid some of those positions or roles. With that, I want to say that these are habits that we want to form on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so if you are running a construction job or project and you are not on top of your numbers, all right, in a simple way, and we'll talk about that today, you are basically driving your car down the highway blind. All right, and eventually you're going to hit something, right? So we want to make sure that we don't have this problem. So let me give you just a real quick story, and maybe some of you guys can relate to this. Recently was working with a contractor, had a breakout year, went from 500,000 in revenue to 1.1 million. All right. In his bank account, he had 8K. All right. At a certain point in this huge jump in revenue, all right, he could barely afford gas in his truck. All right. So, that's a pretty scary scenario. And, generating 60 to 70, $80,000 in revenue turnover, all right, and being left with nothing, right? What a scary scenario that is. Okay. And a lot of it, if you just set yourself up properly and we did the proper steps before we take on jobs, is avoidable. Okay. So profit is designed. It's never assumed. And my analogy here with profit is like framing. If it's not in the blueprint, you're going to constantly be fixing it, right? So if we're not planning for profit, all right, we're never going to get to the point where we can have a business that sustains itself. Okay? It's always going to be a question mark. It's going to be a sore spot of why am I not making more money? right? And you can succeed in many areas of your business, all right, and drop the ball on profit. I see it day in and day out, and I want to make sure that everybody here is well aware when they leave this call of what they need to do and what they need to be focused on in order to make a profitable business. I don't care how much work you do. I don't care how much volume you can push. All right. Most of you guys could probably cut half your volume, focus on profit, all right, and make more money. Think of that scenario for a second. All right. So if you cut half your volume of work and raised your margins 12%, all right, you would make the same money you're making right now. All right. Vice versa, if you drop your price 10%, right? So we drop our price 10%. We have to do 33% more work to make up for that difference. Okay? So again, numbers matter, all right? Systems matter. Understanding your numbers really matters, okay? But it doesn't have to be difficult. Listen, I'm not a scholar by any stretch of the imagination. I learned a lot of what I know about profitability and how to maintain a company and be profitable through making major mistakes, risking taking big risks and making mistakes. You don't have to have that experience because it's terrible. All right. There's nothing worse than working your heart out for 60 to 70 hours a week to find out that you owe money. Okay. And a lot of you guys are in that scenario, whether you realize it or not. And if you want to grow your business to a point where, I don't know, you could take a holiday or a vacation with your family and not be, harassed by your staff and actually take time away for the business, or heaven forbid, have a business that runs without you, you better get awfully comfortable with your numbers. Okay. So, what are the five boosting moves that we can make immediately to start to improve profits? Okay. And this is a reminder for some, and this might be new for others. But first of all, we need to quote for margin. Okay. Now, I know there's a big misconception on what margin is and what markup is. So I'm just going to say it as simply as I can. We're not going to get deep into it because we could have a very in-depth conversation. But when we mark something up, all right, that is not what we're actually retaining. All right. What we're retaining is what our margin is. So margin, for example, if we have a 30% margin on $1 million, all right, would be 300,000. Okay. Now to get to that, we'd have to mark up, all right, our $1 million by 42.6%. Okay. Now, if you're only marking up by 30 to get thinking you're keep retaining 30%, you're actually going to retain 25% of that. Okay. So it's important that we are building in a minimum just to be in the playing field. In as far as I'm concerned, and we can debate about this all day, but to be in the surviving and thriving place, we want to maintain a minimum of 30 to 35. Now this changes; it has variables. All right, but for most of you guys, if you put yourself at a 30% margin on every single job and maintain that margin between 30 and 35, you don't need to be great salespeople. You don't need to really, really kill yourself on other areas. We want to just maintain that margin. You can be a decent order taker and do what you love, and that's building projects. If that's the case, okay. It gets a little bit more complicated when we get over that margin. When we want to get into 50 and 60% margin rates, you have to have a sales process. You have to have a great way of marketing. Okay. But for most of you guys, you can comfortably take on these numbers, and there's going to be something left in the bank account when you're said and done. All right. Now, how do we know? We're tracking our job costs. All right. So job cost is pretty simple. All right. And if you want my job costing, we have it available. You can find it in the Facebook group. It's all over. If you don't know what job costing is, please take that training and do yourself the biggest favor. Almost all of the management accounting systems work off of a job cost. Okay. And that basically means you're tracking your estimated versus your actual in labor, materials, subs, overhead, and you're looking at your costs correctly. Okay. Second or third major area for you guys. All right. And now be honest. I'm going to ask you guys an honest question. How many of you guys on this call right now, all right, charge or bill your change orders immediately? How many?
I don't.
Give me a one in the chat if you are billing your change orders immediately when they come up. That means estimating and getting them approved. Oh my, oh, there's just one. Okay. Wow, wow.
And I only got that from you, Jay,
Yeah. All
a
good,
few
man.
months ago.
So I want to explain something about change orders and why they can be the death of a good company when we're even doing job costing. Most of the time, all right, change orders get left until they're too late. All right. We're not getting them billed in time. If I have a change order on my job, all right, this is what happens. Mr. Owner, we are going to price that out immediately. It's going to carry a higher margin. Okay. We're not at 30, 35% anymore. We're at 50% minimum margin on a change order. Can anybody tell me why we'd be at a 50% margin on a change order? Anybody guess?
Because it wasn't in the original scope and everything has to change because of it. So now it's a
Bingo.
demand.
So do we have to stop our job? Do we have to replan? Do we have to reschedule? Do we have to, of course. And we also have to do that under pressure, under the gun. Okay. So if you misprice those, and lots of guys do, I hear this a lot where they feel bad that there was a mistake on the job. That's not your, if you scoped your job and something's changed, maybe you find something that wasn't, in the original thing, and it's a fair change work order, all right? You need to bill accordingly for that. If your job is stopped and you've lost days, okay, that overhead that you have on your business continues to roll on. All right. So a lot of times they miss undercharge for this. Now, the other thing I do is I invoice my change order 100% the second it's approved. Do they get an invoice for that change work order 100%? Anybody tell me why I would do that?
Because if you don't, you won't get paid.
Correct. Bingo. Right? So if somebody wants a change order, sometimes they can be disgruntled. Most of mine, I don't have that issue, the way that we break our contracts down, and that's something that you would be able to do. But ultimately, you're not going to carry a receivable for somebody else's change in their project, right? And I don't care. Again, I've gotten to the point in my career where I can ask this from any one of the, companies that we work for, a builder, GC, you name it, project manager. And, if they debate it, we just say, hey, no problem. We're not really interested in the change work order. We'll just leave it as is. How do you think that goes? They pay their bill, right? Because it's not my fault that there's a change. There's an inconvenience to me, right? I'm doing them the favor, in my humble opinion, of accounting for the change work order. Okay. So again, when we have changes, you decide how you want to work it, but leaving it to the end, all right, leaving it to the end of the job and then surprising someone with a change work order, not good. All right, you're gonna blow that relationship, fair or not, with that client. Okay? It's easier to get those things out of the way immediately. Okay? Don't wait. Don't give it time. By the end of the job, they've gotten over it, and you're still gonna leave with a happier customer. Okay? Now I'm gonna add one more caveat to this in terms of your invoicing and billing. Okay? We want to increase our profit. Profit has a lot to do with cash flow. Okay? I want everybody to consider how they're billing, how they're invoicing. All right? How they're collecting money. So again, if you were to grow your business, you'll find almost immediately that cash flow becomes a problem at every level. Okay? So the way that we set up our, oh, can't hear you. Hey, Wyatt, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. We had about your question. That wasn't me that made the noise, first of all, but I
Oh,
was asking. I was going to ask when you were ready for take questions. What about a client that you run into an issue where where there is a change order, but they don't want to pay for it, so they don't take your bid, but they're going to bring in another contractor to do it, and it sets your job behind.
yeah, that's a good one. So usually in my contract clause, like I would have
Hmm.
I would have an exclusion for that. So like they're not able to use another contractor for change work orders. If it's fairly priced, now they can request that the price be looked at, right? We can discuss it. Sometimes I do lower my margin in certain situations for it, but ultimately they can bring another contractor in when I'm complete the job, right? Because I'm not taking
Hmm.
risk or liability for their work. And if it costs me time, I bill it by the day, right? So if my crews are stopped in my contract, in our terms and conditions, if we experience a stop, all right, they're entitled, they have to pay me a remobilization fee. So we can demobilize and remobilize if they want to bring in another contractor, all right, but they're going
Hmm.
to pay a hefty fee, and that's 5 to 6% of the contract,
Okay. Yeah, I was
right?
just asking. I ran into that issue that last week,
Yeah.
and she ended up bringing somebody in that was way cheaper than we was. We did what you said, did the margin, all that. But
Mhm.
she said no. She brought someone in way cheaper, but then it set us back a day,
Yeah.
and
Hold
messed
on,
us up.
let me,
No sé, it's okay.
here, I'm gonna mute them. Here, just unmute yourself there, Wyatt.
Yeah, anyways, I was just saying that they set us back about a day and a half. We had to come back an extra day that we didn't plan for
Yep.
to finish out the job.
Okay. So
So,
that's something that you will learn from, and that which should be in your lessons learned. That is a contract clause. Okay.
mhm.
So again, you should have some verbiage into what happens in the case of a change recorder. All right. And if they cost you a day, you should be entitled to compensation for that. Right. So
Mhm.
again, if there's any, delays that are outside of your scope, all right, then you should being compensated for that. So that would be a contract term. And that's used as leverage as well, right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So one more thing when we're talking about cash flow, all right? So you're planning to grow your business, you're planning to make more profit. I've seen plenty of companies that go out of business not because they didn't make profit, it was because they ran out of cash. And that seems to be more common than not, all right? And a lot of times when we look at the way they're invoicing, the way that they're billing their customers, they're making some critical mistakes. Okay, so first and foremost, how many of you guys believe you get more trust out of a client by leaving a large sum of money to the end of the job to collect on? Anybody have that belief? If you do, be honest. All right, we're here to discuss things, so there's no silly questions. Does anyone believe that that's a good way to build trust with a client? Okay.
No, but I
Okay.
have done that in the past, and it hurt me in the long run.
It always will. You will guarantee yourself a unhappy client, even if you did an amazing job. It's much, much easier to do it like this. So most of you guys that are doing legitimate contract work, large sum contracts, all right, I would like to hear you are doing percentage of completion. And I have contractors that are billing weekly. All right. How do they bill weekly? How would I do that? Well, you tie that to your schedule. All right. So the items that you are completing, all right. And if you're using systems, this is very, very easy. I'd love to walk you guys through a system where we tie everything to our bills and we put it right on a schedule and hand it to the customer and say, this is what we're expecting when we hit this point. All right. Now that can be done weekly, that can be done bi-weekly, but there should never be a time where we're leaving large sum payments or we're covering costs on a job. We need to be in an overbuild situation, not an underbuild situation. Okay. More often than not, when companies start to struggle, it's because they're always in a underbuild situation. Okay, or they've agreed to terms that are unfair and leave them for a long period of time in an underbilled situation. So a good example of this is commercial contractors that accept 90-day terms without a payment. So the job's almost done and they're just getting their first payment. Okay, anybody that's lived through this, that's a trap that we want to avoid at all costs. Okay, so again, we want to tie it to the schedule. Now, if you ask a customer for smaller, more frequent payments, I promise you, you're going to have a happier customer, less callbacks, less problems when you get to the end of the job. We should be collecting between 5 and 10%, depending on what it is. All right. And your customer is going to have less problems with your work, less problems with you, less complaints. If we can bill more frequently, more often, and you are giving them an actual schedule that they can follow along with. Okay? Is anybody providing their customers with a schedule? Just so I can get a read of this room, I'd love to know. Is anyone giving their customers a schedule? God, a bunch of contractors in the same room and no one's giving a schedule to their customers, huh? Hmm. Pretty hard to plan for profit if you don't have a schedule for your job, isn't it? No, crickets. Okay. So has anybody seen this method before of percentage of completion and how it's worked? No? Okay.
I've not done the percentages. We've done it by jobs, though. For instance, drywall, trim, paint. We've
Hmm.
separated it in that sections.
Yep, you could totally do that, but in within those things, there's phases of that, right? So
Uh,
again, when you start to set up jobs properly, we build a schedule out based on the tasks being completed. All right. This helps to keep your job on track, but you can also predict your profits when you're getting paid, right? We can time that up when we have to pay our bills so that we're keeping ourselves in a actual overbuild situation, right? So again, how do we convince a customer to pay us like that? Most people just roll their eyes at me when I say it. I'm like, hey, it's if you communicate what the expectations are from the very beginning and you show them a pathway of how they're going to be billed, all right? I've had next to none complain about it. In fact, I've had people very happy about the way that we've progressed with our jobs. And I also can know when a job is on track or off track, right? And I can predict my profits. I can predict that I'm going to have, X amount of money in the bank based on where my jobs are at. Okay. Versus just going out there blindly and guessing at how long this should take, or just, working 60 to 70 hours to try and get it done fast. That's no way to run a business. Okay. That's no way to, plan, and it's costing you money every single time. Okay, there's lots of things that you should foresee coming, but if you're living in a reactive mode, all right, you'll never see it in front of your eyes. Okay? So what habits do we need to have this level of control? All right. And I'm going to make it simple for everyone. All right. We want to review our profit weekly. We want to look at that job cost, have a discussion about it, and then make a plan for the following week to improve it or to optimize it or to, again, figure out where things are. All right. If you're not doing this, if you can't afford yourself 45 minutes, and that's might even be a lot. I can do this in about 15 minutes of reviewing our profit, okay, and what the estimate versus what is actual, all right. I would suggest that you stop being a contractor and maybe go get a job, okay, if you can't afford yourself that time, all right. And you can be mad at me for saying that all you want, but that's the truth, right? We can't learn about a mistake after it's been done, and we have no control over changing it. All right. Much easier to change something or change the outcome while it's happening. All right, preventing it from happening. But if you don't have any insight to that and you can't see what's going on with any sort of clarity, all right, that's a systems problem. All right, and you will not scale out of a systems problem like that. Okay. So these are habits we want to form as a CEO. Okay. The last thing, all right, and I must sound like a broken record to some of our clients, but I'm a big fan of the good, better, best pricing tiers. Okay. Even in change work orders, I offer good, better, best. Okay. And what this allows a customer to do and allows your client to do, all right, is make a decision based on what they're capable of spending. Okay. So again, lots of training on good, better, best. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but if you want to increase your profits, okay, dramatically without not a lot of work, look at building your quotes in good, better, best. All right, you want to win more contracts, okay? Again, good, better, best. Many times we're leaving a ton of money on the table, all right, because we're just trying to price to the lowest price, right? Or we're trying to compete with, other contractors. We shouldn't try and compete. We should be trying to differentiate ourselves by giving customers options, all right, that increase our profit. Okay. And just to give you the high level view of this, we use good, better, best on everything. 80% of our business is done in better. Okay. 10% good, 10% best. All right. Where do you think my margins sit? The highest. Right there in the better. All right. But when presenting an offer to somebody, all right, they don't want just good. They don't want, the best. They want right there in the middle. And that's how you build your quotes out to present to them. That protects you against the low price guy, All right. And it also gives them a clear path to see what's the best. Okay. So moving on from that, we want to talk about how do we track these things. Okay, so again, we have job costs training and tools. My first suggestion is that you take our job cost tool, all right, and start immediately tracking your jobs. Nobody has any excuse for not tracking their job cost. Okay, I can't stress it enough. This is something you can set up on every single job, and it does not take more time. It takes less time. QuickBooks, on the other hand, when you're trying to enter data in through there, first of all, it's not going to give you an accurate picture of where you have made or lost money. Okay. It's not going to give you a clear, job versus actual because it doesn't include overhead and stuff along those lines. Okay. And you are always waiting for information from it. Okay. So a good tool to use, a management accounting tool, or job cost training, or just a general spreadsheet. All right. But we want to review that on a weekly basis. Okay. The next one, which we highly recommend and would help you set up, is JobTread. We're a big fan of it. Again, it follows the principles of management accounting, which we recommend. There's a million others out there as well. Depending on which niche you're in, which product you're serving. It's not best for every contractor, but it's good for some, good majority of them. Okay, so let's take a look. All right. Again, using the reference of my $1.1 million contractor before. Okay. He's doing about 15 jobs a month. Okay. Had a low markup, about 12% margin when we broke it down, although he thought he was pricing at a 25%. So kind of calculate that in your own head. But his jobs were marked up by 25%. He only is retaining a 12% margin. Okay. For most of us, we can't grow a business with that low of margin. Okay. Now, the reality of it is that 93% of contractors are working for between 1 and 3% margin. All right. Hardly seems worth it, doesn't it? If you're in that group, it hardly seems worth all the risk, all the danger we put ourselves in to run a business at 1 to 3% margin. You would probably be better off getting a job. Right? There's no real business there at that point. You can't afford to grow or spend more on marketing. You're just constantly looking to just survive. That's no way to run a business. And my humble opinion is no contractor has to work for those kind of rates, right? So we take it 15 jobs. Again, no money in the bank account. All right. And after we got him down to 10 jobs, 34% margin, and clearing about 8K profit in his pocket per month. Okay. So that's a big stark change from basically zero and owing money to 8K a month. Okay. Doing half the amount of work. Okay. So when we do our weekly job costing, we can almost immediately see an improvement in profit. In every client that I've ever worked with since I started many years ago now, we see immediate improvements with job costing, immediate clarity when they start to use the job costing mechanism, even if it's simple. All right. Just the fact that you know where your numbers are, all right, gives you confidence in pricing, gives you confidence in your numbers, and allows you not to continuously make the same mistakes. Okay, it's your first major aha moment that you should have as a contractor is realizing that you get to control the outcome by your numbers. Okay, so let's talk about some quick wins that we can start today. Each and every one of you can start today. All right, the first quick win, all right, is to review your profit from the last three jobs. Okay. If it is not at a 30% minimum, okay, and I say that as a rough number, but 30% minimum, all right, we want to set our margin rule to 30%. Okay. And again, this has some variables. So if you're if, for example, you are a service-based company doing electrical service, okay, your margin should be up around 50%. Again, in my humble opinion, here's lots of debate on this, but if you're doing smaller ticket jobs, okay, so I'm going to say anything under 5,000, all right, you need to increase your margin, all right, to make up for the inefficiency of doing smaller ticket jobs. Okay. And this could be as high as 100%. All right, depending on what kind of jobs and what size your ticket size is. So anything above that, though, all right, you can safely follow the 30% margin rule. Okay, and then we're not going to do any quotes under the margin target that we've set. Period. Okay. And we want to post this. We want to let everybody know that we're not doing anything. We don't accept any work under a particular margin. And again, be confident in saying no. If somebody's asking you to do work at a lesser price, all right, if you know your numbers, it's easy to say no. It's easy to let it go to somebody else. And guess what? We're surrounded by abundance. There is more jobs out there than you guys could ever possibly imagine doing. All right. Just because you don't have an opportunity in front of you, all right, that's low paying, does not mean that you need to take it on. And it's actually going to hurt your business. All right. Most low level customers, most D clients, we'll call them, all right, are the ones that want you to work for less than this margin. So if you want to stop dealing with dickhead clients and people that take advantage of you, people that complain a lot, and people that are hard to work with, here's the easiest way to prevent them from ever coming into your world again. Raise your price again, get above that 30% margin because you're going to eliminate any price sensitive clients. All right. So, price sensitive are the clients that their biggest fear is paying too much for something in their eyes. Okay. We all know who they are. All right. Above that, we have value-based clients. Okay. Value-based clients understand the costs of getting a quality job. And their biggest fear is working with a contractor that's not going to provide them with, good quality work. They're not going to be able to provide them with a schedule. They're not going to be able to, fulfill their expectations to the job. Okay. So really evaluate if your customers are good customers, ones that are going to help your business to grow, or they're customers that are looking to take advantage of you or looking to get work done for under fair market value. Okay. So again, just a question, and we can answer in the chat box here, but how many of you guys actually know what your average profit margin is? Give me a one in the chat. Let me know you guys are alive in there. All right. Okay. Looks like we've got one. Zero. All right. That's a way of answering. I love it. Okay. So that leads me to believe that I have, 17 or 18 others on this call, all right, that don't know what their margins are. Okay. So at that point, I want you guys all to take a look in the mirror and decide if you want to run a profitable, successful contracting business, all right, or if we should just get a job. All right. Because most of you, if you're not tracking those margins and you're not pricing professionally and getting paid professionally for professional work and all the turmoil that goes into running a contracting business, all right, would be better off probably just getting a job. You'd be a lot less headaches and you'd get out of the way of contractors who are looking to run a business. Okay, now I don't mean that to be mean or anything like that. I just mean it like as honestly and straightforward as I can say it. All right, you have to follow certain rules and you have to have certain good behaviors that exist in all successful contractors. All successful contractors that I've worked with, right, know their margins. They know their numbers. They know what they can price at. And it becomes a weapon that they use, okay, to fight off bad customers and to not accept low paying jobs. Okay. Does anybody here, has anybody heard the term before that you can use if you know your numbers, you know your margins, that's actually a weapon? Anybody ever told you that before? Okay. So let me give you a scenario. For the guys that watch these numbers carefully, all right, and track on every single job and know exactly what they can price on, all right, and not lose money, how do you think that they survive in a recession? Right? We're sort of in a recession in a lot of places in North America right now, okay? And when your demand for your services is dropping, all right, most contractors follow the demand in the market. So they, because the demand, the requests have gone down, or the opportunities gone down, all right, they lower their price, okay? Instead of maintaining a margin and forcing, suppliers and trades and stuff like that, and trying to get their costs lower, they forfeit their margin. Okay, so they give up on their margin and protecting the margin, and then put themselves in a vulnerable position, because then they don't have the cash, they don't have the equity in their business to actually market their way or sell their way out of that recession. And that's usually the death spiral that begins. Okay, I see it a lot. I'm seeing it day in and day out, where again, guys that were really successful during COVID, and where anybody and everybody could get a job. Now, when that market has leaned out and people are being a lot more selective, all right, they're seeing the real, we can see that they've been swimming naked the whole time, all right, and they're really struggling. On the other hand, guys that know their margins, yes, they may be doing lower volume, but they're still in business. Okay, they still have the equity to invest in improving their business. Okay, and they're only waiting now until we hit the opposite side of it, right? So whenever we have a recession coming out of it, there's going to be even higher demand with less competition. All right. A lot of your competitors are going to be out of business, right? Because they didn't know their numbers. They could not adjust to the changes in the market. All right. When you do know your numbers, you can adjust to the changes in the market very quickly, and we don't lose money. So on the other scenario, we have a huge boom, we have a huge, surge in work, all right? And then guys don't adjust their numbers because they don't know it. So now their demand goes up and they keep their margins at the same. What happens in that scenario? Do we leave money at the table? Right?
Sure
Do we
do.
lose it? Absolutely. So this is where, again, when you have your finger on the pulse and you see a backlog of, let's say, 90 days or more, and you're not raising that margin to maximize your profit, all right, you are essentially, cutting your own grass, right? Where a smart contractor is going to take advantage of that situation, and it's the smart way to do it because it slows down your demand. Okay, it slows down the number of jobs you're going to win. All right, and it keeps you in a maximum efficiency zone. Right, we shouldn't be trying to do high volumes of work, in my humble opinion. All right, that will come. All right, when you know these fundamentals, these are like levers in your business. Okay? Just like when you get the ride moving too fast, you got to slow it down. All right? Vice versa. When it's going too slow, you've got to be able to speed it up. This is how you do it, by knowing your numbers, right? By knowing these margins, protecting them, and using them to your advantage. Okay? Understanding when the appropriate time is to add these, again, it's part of your profit planning. Okay? So again, if you're just keeping one stagnant number over the entire season for your margins, all right, that's essentially going, hey, I'm just going to ride a roller coaster. I'm just going to take whatever comes at me and away we go. All right. I don't know about you, but roller coasters in my business usually equal stress, right? Anxiety. Nothing new or creative. We're just surviving. Unless you really, really enjoy that, I mean, I don't recommend it, right? So we've got to learn to use our numbers to manage our business. Okay. So if any of you guys are having a real struggle with what we've talked about today, I'd love to have a chat with you. We can do a profit analysis. We can also give you some tools to help you understand these numbers. And again, what I want to stress here is most guys shut down when we talk about numbers. I know I was certainly guilty of it at one point in my career. I never wanted to look at the books. I never wanted to look at accounting because I knew it was bad, right? So I just kept working hard and hoping that it would get better. It doesn't get better. Okay. You have to face it. You have to understand it. You have to take ownership of it. All right. And you have to make it a habit on a weekly basis at minimum. Okay. These is what all successful contractors have done. All right. And I want to be here to reassure anybody here that's not there yet, that it's a lot easier than you think. Okay. I mean, the people we've, brought this to in a simple, simple way. Again, it's like the aha moment comes out, and they finally see the opportunity in their business again. They have energy, right? Nobody wants to go blindly into, a chaos, right? If you want to get out of the chaos, this is your first step. All right? So, again, just to build some context for each trade, right? For remodelers especially, tracking every change order, okay? Making sure that we're getting our billings out quickly, all right? For roofers, for single trades, the biggest thing is building your margin into upgrades, building your margin into how we're quoting those jobs. Okay? This would be your biggest takeaway, biggest win from today if you are doing your job costing, right? And then, of course, we want to be able to adjust our margin just like a dial and plan for profit, all right? Raising our prices and lowering our prices throughout the season based on supply and demand, okay? This is going to allow us to have more, when we're super busy and be able to actually have something to show for it at the end of the year, okay? So again, it's not about, raising your prices without an understanding of why, all right? Although most of you guys could all raise your prices with probably little to no effect on your sales, okay? But we want to know why. We want to have trust in our pricing model, all right? And this is all about having a pricing model that allows us to make good data-driven decisions rather than emotional reactive decisions to pricing. Okay? So with my last statement before we do an open question here is busy doesn't equal profitable. Okay? Again, I don't care how busy you are. I don't care how many jobs you've won. Most companies that are in the biggest trouble that I see, all right, are very busy. They got lots of work, right? They're the guys that come in and brag to me that they win 70 to 90% of their jobs. Immediately I go, "Uh-oh. Should we be winning that many jobs? If you're pricing properly, should you be winning 70 to, there's not a salesman that I've met in this world yet that can price at a professional level that's selling 70 to 90%. Unless you're an extremely niche market. Again, it's just the laws of numbers here. Okay? So again, if any of you guys are interested in booking a call, having a chat about this, or receiving any of our job cost systems, just drop a profit in the chat. We'll get in touch with you, and we can have a call, or we can share the job costing with you. All right. And now for my favorite part, which I'm sure it's the same two people that we get to talk to. But anybody have any questions? Anybody confused on any of the stuff that I've just shared?
Maybe overwhelmed, not confused, but overwhelmed. A lot of
Yeah,
things that
so
need to happen, right?
for sure. So, and I think for you, it'd be just a reminder, right? You know these things. You have these
I
principles
do.
already built in, right? But again, you need that reminder of, what should we be focusing on, right? So, a lot of times what happens is we get busy and all of a sudden we're being pulled in many different directions, okay? Especially in contracting business, like the ADD effect, and the efficiency of everything we're doing goes down. Everything we're doing, everything we're touching, and the anxiety goes up. Okay. When anxiety goes up or stress goes up, all right, what tends to happen is nothing new or creative happens. All right. So we stay stuck. That's the definition of being in a hamster wheel. Okay. Nobody wants to be in the hamster wheel, right? No one wants to just feel like, they're just working mindlessly. So to break that chain, to break that effect, okay, the only way you can do that is by getting yourself into a state of present. Okay, what's going on right now? And my easiest way to find yourself in a present state of mind, okay, is look at your numbers because you know that they're the control. All right. So if we're doing job costing and we've tracked our numbers, we know where we stand profitably, be it good or bad. All right. That's going to put you in a present state of mind. And you're going to be able to make better decisions based on that information. All right. So again, if you knew that an employee, for example, was, taking double the time of a job and had doubled his hours than what you've budgeted, would you immediately intervene and change something? Or would you just let it go? Right? Or how about this? A supplier quoted you $10,000 for a job, but you just got a $15,000 invoice. Would that be something you would take up with them? Probably, right? So you would not believe how many times just going through general like review of people's finances that that's exactly what's been happening. All right? They get a price from the, outside sales rep. Good example, right? Suppliers are famous for this. They get a price. They forget, all about that. They don't use purchase orders or anything, and then they just order it and boom. The price is $2,000 to $3,000 right out of their profit. Right. And I've caught this and I catch it with my suppliers day in and day out. So again, if you don't think it's happening, you're out of your tree, right? Or we don't negotiate for better pricing, right? We don't negotiate for terms. We don't negotiate or take advantage of these things. All of this leads to uncertainty, right? All of this leads to us running around and just reacting to things. Okay? It doesn't lead to real planning or being confident in ourselves, right? Confident in our decisions. All right. The most dangerous contractors that are under the sun that I can see, the badass contractors out there, they're always confident, right? They know their numbers so well and so intricate that when even they lose a job, they can celebrate. All right. And when you can celebrate because your competitor has just put themselves in a more dangerous position by taking less profit, and all right, what you can run that business at, and they've made a mistake, that is a reason to celebrate, not a reason to be sorry. Okay. And then on the other hand, when you sell your jobs at a margin that is above theirs, okay, and you're growing, all right, because people don't grow through volume, they grow through profit. Okay. So knowing these numbers, knowing and being discipline for them is going to make all the difference in the world. All your problems can be solved, all right, by having clarity in your business, right? You're all from a strategy perspective. I've met very few people that, when given the right information, can't make a good decision, or else you wouldn't be here, right? So if you have the right information and you're being told the right things, all the other noise starts to quiet down. All right. All the other things that you may feel are important or that are critical tend not to be, right? Now we're focused on the few things that matter. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Any other things you'd like to add or a takeaway? Okay.
Well, there's Andrew in the chat. He was asking, how would you do a profit assessment for furniture assembly type jobs?
Well, that's a good question, I guess. For furniture assembly, so is that your service, Andrew? Like you're assembling furniture like in someone's home? Like explain to me the business a bit. Like are you manufacturing or just assembling? That's probably what I need to know more first.
He says in the chat here, some of my jobs I do are furniture assembly where I put things together.
Okay. So that's exactly how I explained, right? So anything with a service element to it, all right? Although you probably wouldn't have the supply, you would follow the same principles, right? So again, you would have the same margin, same job costing on each project that you do. That would be the easiest way. Okay?
Yeah, I think he
All
got it.
right. All right. This is a great time, guys. If you have the questions, don't be shy. Let's ask the questions. And I'll stress this. This is a safe spot. Nobody's can ask a stupid question, I promise. And still don't have any money. I'm charging 30%. Now, let me ask you, if you're charging 30%, all right, how are you doing that? Is that through markup or is that your margin? Because if you're charging 30%, just 30%, you're going to go broke. Okay. I just said that. The bottom line is you need to be at a margin, which is 42.6%. Okay. So 42.6% puts you just in the game. You're not going to thrive. You're not going to blow up and become rich overnight. You're going to cover your costs and you're going to pay your bills. Okay. The key is to get above that. All right. So any business, and this is pretty standard across the board, right? When we add up the numbers, You've got to be at a minimum 30% margin after costs. I'm cash poor. Yep. Okay, so my suggestion is if you are cash poor now, well, we would want to look at the way we're billing our customers. Okay. So are you following a payment plan? Right? Do you have clear set expectations for your jobs? Are you collecting a big enough deposit at the beginning? That's another one, right? If I'm doing furniture assembly, for example, all right, I'm going to take a 50% deposit up front. All right, that they're going to cover all my costs, right? Especially if it's a lower ticket item, all right? I'm going to try and collect, 50% up front. Okay, on top of the expenses. Yeah. So again, that it depends with a lower ticket item like that, I would be adding that. Yeah, absolutely. So you would be adding that 30% on top of your full expenses. So that's your overhead, everything else, you would be adding that on. Okay, I typically collect 70% deposit. Okay. So how is cash flow a problem? It can only mean one thing. If you're collecting a 70% deposit, okay, and you have no cash in the bank, all right, then you're not doing enough volume or you're not charging enough, right? So the most dangerous spot for every contractor to start off in is under that $250,000 mark. That's really where you have to be everything to everyone. In California, you can only take 10%, 1K, whichever is less. Yeah. Okay. I'm HVAC contractor. Ooh, what do you mean? The richest guys I know are HVAC contractors. What's going on here, Michael? We gotta have a call, buddy. That's a concern for me because you are in high demand. You have like the HVAC model is one of my favorite, HVAC and electrical. Yeah, but yeah, it would definitely be to do with your pricing model, and I guarantee you're probably underpricing for sure. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, we'll have a call. We'll get you sorted out. Again, like I said, some trades just have it a lot easier than others. And most HVAC electrical guys, I call them the prima donnas. They get away with murder, right? With what they can do. So yeah, we can get that model. That's a pricing model, for sure. Chances are you're just billing labor and time and material. You're undercharging. I'm getting a lot of leads. As of lately, they have been window shoppers, haven't had an appointment in a week. Okay. So, again, are we looking at that in a short-term span or a long-term span, right? So, a lot of times guys don't plan ahead. They don't know their natural ups and downs in their markets. So, for example, every business has a seasonality to it. Sometimes for example, a roofer is going to have a slower period, and a roofer in Canada would have a slower period during January and February. And if you're not planning ahead for those, if you're not looking 90 days into the future, you run dead smack into them. Okay. A lot of times during the summer months, some homeowners, some home service based businesses have a decrease in sales, but then they're immediately picked up in September, right? So that would be my first place to look is that are you in a natural lower part of the season? Okay. And those window shoppers, again, we want to automate some of those follow-ups and look at our sales process primarily for pushing guys across the line. I would say the most people that tell me that they have window shoppers just means they don't know how to follow up. They don't know how to continuously stay on top of their leads. It was wise to take smaller jobs to keep the wheels turning or stick to my numbers on quotes. Not being worked on. I'm a concrete contractor. Oh, okay, great. So to answer your question, it's your pricing model. Okay, so concrete contractor, lots of experience with those guys. Again, they have seasonality to the business, but on smaller projects, you should be carrying a larger margin. And you're going to find that it's in your head that you are assuming you'll lose jobs. All right. Smaller jobs, larger margin. All right. It's going to work out to the same in the end, right? So bigger jobs, you can afford to take a smaller margin. Just it's simple math. Let me just explain it to you. So when you have to set up and start a small job, all right, even if it takes a day, day and a half, all right, and then you have to find another job after that, you are losing efficiency in between those jobs. You're losing productivity. Okay. So versus having a larger job where you can consistently send the same, three, four guys. They start at, a certain set time. They finish at a certain time. So you lose efficiency on those jobs. So again, you still follow the same principles. We want to maintain a margin on larger scale jobs, wherever that may be in your business, in your niche. Okay. And the power here is that once you figure out your number, all right, you can be ultra aggressive, right? Taking and sniping all the high value customers. All right, that's where I'm talking about in terms of finding your sweet spot. So most of my clients find it at that 30% range where you're not attracting price sensitive clients anymore. Okay, they're turned off by their numbers, they go away. All right, literally half the population, 50% is price sensitive. Okay, meaning that you weren't going to win that job, they're going to take the lowest bid. The other half, the other 50%, okay, is value orientated, and this is pretty standard across the board. You want to make sure you're dealing with only value orientated customers, right? Ones that are willing to pay the true cost of a project and that are looking for things other than price. Okay? So again, like I said, your numbers are what protect you as the business owner. And again, I can't stress it enough. It's a defense mechanism. Okay, you don't want to deal with assholes. Stop charging the lowest price. What else can I say, right? Like, how many of you guys know this to be true, right? It's always the guy that you gave a great deal to that you did for cost basically that has the most complaints and that gives you the biggest headaches. On the other hand, the bigger jobs, not so much an issue, is it? Right? How do I find value-oriented customers? That's a whole other discussion, my friend. And again, that's a marketing and sales discussion. We won't get through that question on this call, but I would certainly like to point you the right way. And to tell you, to be honest, to tie into this conversation, the way you find value-oriented customers is you start charging the appropriate price, right? So somebody that's willing to pay the value of your service when you know what that value is, okay? They know people. They know people just like them. Okay? And they're gonna help you find other jobs, and you're gonna attract people that are expecting to pay a fair price. Okay? In this world, do we not have people that, buy Honda Civics? And we have people who buy Lamborghinis. Okay? Those two people are not the same. Right? And I want you to think about that. Like, here's some people out there that have all the money in the world, but still buy the Honda Civic. Right? They perceive the value in other things. Whereas you have a guy, that can't afford the Lamborghini but still buy the Lamborghini. So no matter what you say, and no matter which way you want to slice it, it's more about matching your value, all right, and what you want to charge to the customer you want to do business with. Okay? And you can never get that confused, right? There are people in this world that will buy a $500 t-shirt. Okay? And they've justified that in their head, all right, by what they perceive as value. Okay? So again, and there's also people that won't spend more than $10 on a t-shirt. It's about finding where you stand in the market and where you can offer the best value with the least amount of resistance. Right? I've been told that, but when work slows down, I start to panic. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So good contractors and guys in your position, what you want to get out of is that reactive mode. Okay? Because again, when we don't know our numbers and we're not playing ahead of the game and we're making reactive emotional decisions, yeah, you're going to get yourself in trouble because when the demand drops, all right, you panic. That's exactly what I just said about pricing. You can't panic because if you knew you were losing money on all those jobs, okay, you're probably going to make some different decisions, right? And that's where sales and marketing comes into play, is making sure that you can foresee things coming at you, right? So again, if you know that you have a slow period historically, all right, well, we're going to pick up our sales and marketing to offset that so that we're not playing that roller coaster game. Okay? Hopefully this has been helpful, guys. You've been great today. Love the questions. We're back here every Thursday. If you need any help, again, guys, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And